happy to have this opportunity to talk to Reema Abbasi about sin, and I must confess that I only came to know about Wajda Tabassum through Reema Abbasi. So pardon my ignorance, but I found the stories absolutely gripping, and I could also imagine the hard task the translator must have had. So I'd like to, talk to you, Reema. First of all, what attracted you to Wajda Tabassum and the stories?
It was an untouched, voice, except for one story of hers, which was Uttran, cast-offs. And Meera and I made Kama Sutras, the tale of love. The first half of that film is Uttran, and after that she sort of builds on it. So I wanted to translate, but I was looking for a voice and a woman, which, we didn't have in English, or much of in English. So that's how I started looking for her work. And a lot of it is not available. Was available in Urdu Bazaar, Lahore. So that's how I selected about 19 stories. And one chapter is Meri Kahani, my story, which is about her own life.
I'd just like to read a bit from the translator's note, in which, Reema has talked about the work, and she's given the background that these stories were written in the 1950s in very orthodox Hyderabad. And she's written that Wajda's work was viewed as explosive, unorthodox, and impure. She was, of course, from a respectable, conservative, but poor home. Wajda Tabassum, in her early 20s, was reviled for her non-conformist, semi-erotic work. Old-fashioned Hyderabad saw her as an impure menace, determined to shock, lead women astray, and tarnish the family name. Her publisher's office was torched, but I also read that her husband was supportive and in fact, published some of her work. So even in this orthodox societies, I think, good to know that at least there were some supporters and from her own family. And Reema, I also wanted to ask you about her style, because obviously you read the Urdu. What is it like in terms of what is her strength, as you see it, characterization, language, plot?
So it took a long while to her work, because she writes Hyderabadi Urdu or Urdu.
We might simply need to get someone to check your mic, because it's static and your voice is coming in.
Hello.
Yeah, I was asking you about her style, what were her strengths in terms of whether it was plot, characterization, language.
She writes in Hyderabadi Urdu, and what was very fascinating about her work was the women. She women somehow are wedged between, these very strict customs and morality like they are even now. So, it was really nice to, the plot was brilliant.
This is very distracting.
So the plot was, her plots were incredible because of the sudden twist and the switch in the entire story. It's not predictable, and it's how they find emancipation or revenge, or there are different ways to look at it, but somehow they liberate themselves through their own machinations. So that was fascinating. What was difficult to translate or to, for it to sit well in English were the really, really elaborate descriptions. So she's a highly descriptive writer, which is all wonderful in Urdu, but it really wasn't quite, so I had to, that's the only area where I had to sort of shorten the descriptions and work on, just making it a little more concise.
Reema, I think you've done a wonderful job of capturing the essence of the stories and in creating the atmosphere of the time. It's sort of very evocative in that respect. And what is also fascinating is, of course, you've written, she's written about the Nawabs of the time, one nymphomaniac Nawab who is, meets his sort of fate. And but the amazing part I also found was the women. They were not, let's say, just passive. They also were, I think, exploring their sexuality, and they were also, in their own ways, within the limited space they had, they were also taking revenge. They were also betraying the Nawabs that they were married to. So, in that respect, they were powerful women in some, you could say that they did not take their situation lying down. And so, that is the other fascinating part, that in such an orthodox society, women within their own space, they explored the, frontiers of their freedom. And the stories are really, captivating. And I also read somewhere that she was known as the female Mando because of the subjects that she chose to write about. So in that context, I want to ask you, Mando came to Pakistan and he was victimized. What do you think would have happened to her if she had decided to migrate to Pakistan? Very hypothetical question.
No, I think it was good that she didn't make that shift because she was, I think, far too emancipated in her mind. I think she would have been lynched. So yeah, that's, revile is a small word.
Absolutely. And I know, in this society, this type of literature would probably have been banned. This country is often known as Banistan. So books, quite possibly would have been banned, and she could have, faced court cases the way Mando did, or worse, because, here it's not always the legal process that people resort to. There are threats to writers, threats to free thinkers, threats to anyone who dare express themselves and go against the norms. And Reema, what do you want to add?
The most, I think, fascinating part of her story and therefore her women. So some are about the debauchery in aristocratic homes of Hyderabad, Deccan. There are, there's the flesh market. So there's a story from there. Then there are some pretty dark stories of very poor homes. So even in the 50s, in Hyderabad of the 50s, it wasn't easy for her. I mean, it's when you read the way she sort of got her stories to editors of newspapers and to magazines, it's really, a crackdown within home and outside of the home, how her family turned on her, and they just thought that this was a woman or a girl, a very young girl, who was bringing shame to the family with her stories. Although they were very popular, but they didn't make the family proud at all. So that's one aspect. And I think that when we were talking about her heroines, somewhere they're all sort of embroiled in very difficult circumstances. Whether it's the nymphomaniac Nawab or whether it's the triple talaq, as India has just 2 years ago passed a law against it. So there's a story where that happens, and so there are different themes where she's relevant even now. The battle with purity and goodness and these definitions that women are always trying to battle and or to confront or to live with or to succumb to, surrender to. I think that is the challenge that she presents with her work, her life, the way she chose to live it. So that was the most fascinating aspect as well. For me, I think Vajda was a very young heroine, a real heroine, and she was very poor, and she used to sing and borrow books from her college students and seniors, and that's how she used to sort of see the world. Actually, she never stepped foot, she couldn't afford to travel out of Hyderabad, so that was her world. And so that I think makes her very special, and I think that this being the Women's Day month with Aurat March tomorrow and Haya March as well, I think it's an interesting launch to have, because we're still seeing the same balance, imbalance, right, wrong, purity, impurity. We're still there. So I think that's.
I think, we're still in the midst of that conflict, even in the 21st century. And in Pakistan, of course, we have a long way to go. Do you think she was influenced by Ismat Chugtai in any way, or inspired by her? Because Ismat Chugtai is the other, let's say, feminist writer, perhaps ahead of her time as well.
They were, she was too young. She didn't really know them. They were in Bombay. She was in Hyderabad. She was writing for, newspapers, magazines. So she had heard of them, and she wasn't a part of the progressive writers movement because I think, she was struggling, to get her work out, to get her short stories in the form of columns out. So she mentions Jilani Bano coming to visit her. And that's there. She talks about all the books she read, which is, Mahalakshmi Kapul and things like that. But she mentions Manto, Ismat Abbas, she talks about. But no, she didn't really know them, so she may have been, but she doesn't say. She doesn't say that. She talks about Krishan Chandra, and I think, that influence was there. But not in her work. She was struggling with entirely different things. Yeah.
And just to end, any story that, you would call your favorite, one of the ones you translated?
Well, there's a favorite character in the stories that for me, please, I'm sure it won't be for others, but writing her was really amazing. It's in a story called Rozi Ka Sawal, and it's a prostitute by the name of Shalu, and it's a beautiful character where living in that kind of a world of absolute destitution, poverty, etc. She's so idealistic, she's so kind-hearted, she's a free spirit. And that is a favorite character. And the story that fascinated me the most was the darkest, I think. I think at least the publishers found that, the Indian publishers had checked. They thought that, we know that the book is supposed to be dark, but this dark. And that's Kale Badal. That's really a pretty heart-wrenching story, I think. I'm sure others, and then another important point that, we still debate, and she actually did bring up such fine print, was a story called Nat Ka Gurur, is a story called Nat Ka Gurur. And we still talk about certain ornaments. They're beautiful, but there are sections of society where they denote, certain aspects of a woman, or again, purity. So she deals with that also. So that takes serious, vision on the part of a virtually caged poor girl who just wants to write, read, and be known for someone who did different kind of work.
I don't know whether this format allows for questions of the audience, comments. It does? Thank you. Anyone wants to add anything to the discussion?
How did you do the research sitting there?
I went to Lahore.
Is she famous in India?
She's,
now?
She is, so she is mentioned in the credits of Meera Nair's book, and Uttaran became a TV serial also. So, but it is surprising that, one story became so popular and yet she was untouched. So I'm not sure if she was popular or too, forward, as they say. But no, so I can't really say.
So how did you go about researching her and about the life? Where did you find it?
No, I found it in books in the Urdu Urdu Bazaar, as I said, of Lahore. And that's where I found some of the short stories. A lot of them are lost. But yeah, so I selected out of those volumes. And that's...
I can't wait to read it.
There's one more point. She didn't write a novel. She only confined herself to.
What was her education? Where did this wellspring of writing come from? Did she have any structured education, or it was
Yes,
just
she-
natural to her?
It was natural, and I think she read a lot. She went to college and school in Hyderabad, and initially they lived in Amravati near Bombay, and then they moved to Hyderabad during partition, and then her story sort of begins, and she was raised by her nanny, so she ensured that she went to school, she got some kind of education. She did go to college. I think she did. Yeah, she did a master's from college. Yes.
Do you have more questions? I'm sure there are a lot of great writers, but what made you attracted to her, and that attracted that you translated a lot of her stories from Hyderabadi Urdu to English?
Her guts.
And are there any similarities between you and her?
Definitely not her character. Yeah. But I'd love to be like her.
Can you elaborate more? What do you mean?
You'll have to read the book.
Oh, okay, all right.
Zora,
Hi, Reema. How did you learn about her? All the information you have about her background, how did you put it together?
I was lucky enough to find Meri Kahani in one of her short story collections, and so that's how, and then of course talking to her son, one of her sons who lives in Bombay, Mumbai, and so we had to get copyright permission, and it's a whole other story where I think that's the journalist in me that came into play, looking for him, and there was this strange sort of a little bit of a information on her husband, and then looking for her husband and that surname and family, etc. And then on Google there was this visiting card, and I just sent an email to that, to the address on that, and it turned out to be her late husband's nephew in Oman somewhere. And so he alerted the son, and the son got in touch with me, and that's how I got some of the information.
Fascinating. Thank you.
no, I just wanted to tell you that this is Reema's first, I think, attempt in the field of fiction. She's written some very remarkable books. One about, I think, temples in Pakistan, etc. So this was one thing which I would like to point out. And the other thing is that like Manto, who never wrote a novel, he wrote short stories and character sketches. Walda Tabassum didn't write a novel. Why? Any reason?
I know that she was bedridden for about 11 years before she died. So that's severe arthritis, and So maybe the plan failed, but I think her short stories leave a mark. Yeah.
You know, writing for magazines, etc. And yeah, perhaps, because she was contributing to magazines and publications and earning a living that way. So perhaps writing a novel could have been a luxury
Yes.
for somebody in her circumstances.
And I think very few people, is, sorry, Ismat Choktai also wrote one novel, Teri Lakir, but her popularity rests on short stories.
That's right.
You said that you had discovered her books in Lahore, in the bazaar there. But that made me wonder, to what extent is she known here? I mean, does anyone study her? Does anyone talk about her? Is she known sort of in any way if the books are in Lahore? Who reads them?
They're in the Urdu. I found them in Urdu Bazaar.
Yes, that's what I mean.
In Urdu.
Yes, well,
Yes.
yes, but I mean, people must be studying Urdu. They must
Yes,
be
of course. Avid Urdu readers know her. I mean, like Umar Said and Asif Nurani Saab, and there are quite. I mean, the Urdu dance definitely know her name.
Oh, that's what I wanted to know. I mean, because you said that in India she was not so well known. But
Those who
yeah.
are deep into the language and
Yeah,
that
okay. Well,
reading culture. Yes.
Well, that's what counts in many ways.
Yes.
What is your next project?
This is just a few months old.
Could you also maybe talk about a sentence or a phrase in Urdu that you found challenging and how you translated it in English? If you have
That's an amazing question. That's a really cool question. Except that there were quite a few. I wish I brought the Urdu version. Maybe we can discuss that. About that. Yeah, there was a lot. Especially in stories like Chinan. I mean, that's a pretty out there word for fallen woman, as they say. So there were some cuss words. There was some the dialogue. I think there's self-censorship somewhere in us also. So I had to dilute some of the dialogues. But yes.
Maybe you write the second edition for the brave. The director's cut.
No, I think that's
The unedited version.
Reema, I also wanted to say that finally I think translators are being recognized as well. At one time it was like a thankless job, but it's good to know, and I think Manisa would agree, that translators are now being recognized, and I think particularly now Daisy Rockwell is talked about a lot with the translation of Tomb of Sand.
Well, they've come into major prizes now, translated books. Before translated books weren't in the, you just had everything anglophone, whatever. But now they've expanded it. So
Yes. So it's not a thankless job anymore.
yes, it was published and that's
Again, the same version. And
So-
because in India we have a very less population reading Urdu. It's mostly Hindi. So that was one of the reasons that she must not be well known. No, I mean, she wrote in Hindi.
So Reema, here's wishing you all the best for your next venture and more power to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much. Really